Story 1. My ex-husband. 30 years ago, he abused me terribly, but there was not as much protection against domestic violence then. Police would not help, and multiple agencies brushed off my complaints. This man was terrible, a budding serial killer. I have spent the last 40 years avoiding him. Fast forward to about 2 months ago. He tortured and abused a woman who used smooth talk to get away from him after being held against her will for 3 days. She promised not to tell what he had done to her if he let her go to the hospital. While at the hospital, she told everything and set him up for arrest. Now his name is all over the news. Other people he hurt are coming forward, and charges are being added. There are about 30 charges against him. He is never getting out of jail, and now everyone knows I was telling the truth back then. Story 2. Ken McElroy was a terrible person who terrorized a town until the residents got fed up and took matters into their own hands. Story 3. Oskar Dirlewanger was a Nazi Schutzstaffel commander who was so disturbed that even the Nazis did not want to be associated with him. His unit, the Dirlewanger Brigade, was considered the most violent and brutal of the Schutzstaffel Waffen units and was responsible for the Walla massacre and several raids across Poland and Belarus, where they committed some of the worst atrocities of the war outside of concentration camps. At the end of World War II, he was arrested and held prisoner until his trial. However, the guards overseeing him were Polish resistance fighters who spent 2 to 3 days beating him to death. Story 4. A man in my hometown murdered his wife and daughter on his boat and burned it on his daughter's 18th birthday. He bought himself a Corvette and got into an accident racing someone on the freeway, which left him paralyzed from the neck down. When the investigation was closing in, he took his motorized wheelchair to the dock, drove it off into the ocean, and killed himself. Robert Meyer, Sitka, Alaska. Story 5. I searched for a former commanding officer. He was disrespectful to the crew, superiors, wife, and family. His pictures found online were mugshots. He was arrested for child pornography and statutory rape. He is now a registered sex offender. Story 6. The biggest bully in high school who targeted the meek for just glancing at him was eventually shot to death after picking on the wrong person. No one I knew mourned him. Story 7. Rapist dies alone, cold and drowning. Story 8. I had a teacher who refused to intervene when a group of delinquents bullied me in one of my classes. She kept quiet while they talked trash and threatened me to my face. She just turned her head and pretended not to hear anything. I couldn't defend myself because I usually got in trouble while the bullies got away with it. It was so bad that I had the chance to transfer out of the class, but she refused to recommend my transfer, which kept me trapped for the rest of the year. How she could allow a student to endure bullying without helping has bothered me for years. Ironically, her son was in the same grade and was friends with the bullies, but he never bothered me. If her son had gone through the same thing, I have no doubt she would have taken action. She wanted to protect his friends even though they were wrong. Years later, her husband and son sued her doctor for medical malpractice because the physician misdiagnosed her, and she bled to death. Story 9. The person who harmed me as a teenager was exposed online for sharing inappropriate pictures and soliciting sex on FetLife while he was married to his pregnant wife. A group of friends and I found some humor in his exposure and humiliation. Story 10. Harvey Weinstein has been diagnosed with cancer. Although I do not wish cancer on anyone, hearing this news brought a smile to my face. Story 11. I had an ex who did everything from throwing me down the stairs, causing permanent nerve damage, to getting a job at my mother's hair salon after we broke up. He became her stylist and used this time with her to discuss her children for years, including sexual assault and physical abuse, the whole thing. At some point, when it was discovered that he got a license, the job, and selected my mother as a client to keep tabs on me, the salon owners, who were close friends with my mother, tried to fire him. He took control of their client list and blackmailed them to keep him employed. Anyway, I moved back to the town we all lived in about 15 years later, and I was just curious about what he was up to. I was always afraid he would show up somewhere and cause a scene. It turns out he had a spinal stroke and is a paraplegic in a wheelchair. He set up a fundraiser because he is not eligible for disability, and it is for day-to-day things. He is absolutely not receiving the funds he would need to survive. He apparently has one friend. He has alienated everyone. I now live in comfort knowing that if I ever run into him, all I would need to do is walk up a flight of stairs, and I am free of him. Story 12. A guy took a photo of me in the shower after breaking through a locked bathroom door and shared it around the school via Bluetooth. He later became a bodybuilder influencer. When one of his relatives died, he posted a mournful black and white photo of himself semi-naked with his head in his hands, as if crying, with a caption like, "Rest in peace, Grandma." The post went viral and reached the top of some Reddit pages for how cringeworthy it was. I still see it occasionally years later. It was poetic, but not in the way he intended. Story 13. The father of an abuse victim I met was imprisoned, and his fellow inmates took care to leave him an eye so he could see what they had done. Story 14. A guy in my hometown, early 20s, with a huge ego. He lived with his mom and dad and had a ton of toys. A four-wheeler, a big lifted truck, a snowmobile, a boat, and a motorcycle. He was always revving and flying around the roads, intentionally aiming for your car to watch you freak out. He'd drive into the gravel when I was hitchhiking and spray me with stones and coal from his diesel pickup. Even in high school, he was a tool. He would say, "My shoes cost more than your house. I shower more than you. I eat more than you. My mom does everything for me. Ha! You cut your own grass, loser." He would throw empty pop cans at me when I was walking the county roads to work. Fast forward to the bang we heard on a Friday afternoon when he hit a pole and ripped his motorcycle in half. He was pronounced dead at the scene. What a lousy person. The only shame is that guys can act like this and grow up down the road, maybe look back and cringe. This guy died young, so he didn't get that chance to look back. Story 15. Ken Rex McElroy terrorized a small town for years. He started with petty crimes, moved on to bigger crimes, witness intimidation, and rape. His wife was 15 years old when he decided he wanted her. He threatened her family when they tried to stop it. He got away with actual murder by intimidating witnesses. This went on for years. He finally bullied the wrong person, a shop owner beloved by the town. The whole town, or at least most of it, came out with guns, found him in his car, pulled his wife out to safety, and then everyone shot up the car until he was dead. The police came out the next day and everyone basically said they did not see anything. The police hated McElroy too, so they said it was a mystery and left it at that. Story 16. My former boss put me through hell for an innocent Facebook post that had nothing to do with her. She found it insulting simply because she couldn't live a life where everything is not about her. I told her politely to go away and that I would block her without giving her the option to control my private profile. After that, she focused on instructing everyone to always be on their best behavior, never doing anything that could potentially harm the company's image. We were all employees of a large corporation. She was head of public relations. I soon found a better job and left that difficult environment. Fast forward to the fall of 2020, her company was about to lay off many people, and she was traveling to Dubai in the middle of a pandemic, posting images of herself in luxury, with a cocktail in her hand, probably all paid by company money. Her social media accounts were all public. Reporters criticized her relentlessly. She quit and went to another company, seemingly unaffected by the situation, but after less than a year, she was fired there because she was utterly incompetent and clearly knew nothing about public relations. I still smile when I think about that. Story 17. I am still patiently waiting for that, but in the meantime, I have been aging a couple of French Bordeaux wines to celebrate the occasion. It does not matter how many more things this morally bankrupt person will get away with. Such a person is closer to the expiration date than many of us. Story 18. I know a few people I could talk about, but they involve legitimate crimes and I don't know the statute of limitations. There was a guy named Sean who used to pick fights with goths and punks in high school and call them homophobic slurs. He was a stereotypical metalhead of the 1980s. Big white shoes, blue jeans, and a band shirt. He wasn't big enough to be a bully, but he would still get in people's faces, punch their shoulders, or trip them if he caught them walking alone. You can probably see where this is going. The year after high school, his friends caught him and another guy in a sexual act. Then he was basically kicked out of his friend group for being what he accused others of throughout high school. Intolerance of homosexuality is terrible, except when it happens to closeted gay homophobes. Story 19. The three real estate brothers from New York who were recently arrested and have no bail for human trafficking and organized rape over the past decade have been in jail for about 6 months. Their trial is expected to take place next year. Story 20. Former floor manager of the shop where I worked for 12 years. He used to take workers into meetings, and when they complained about working 65-hour weeks while he worked 40, he would say without hesitation, "You signed up for it when you took the job." He lived in a gated community and easily made $200,000 a year, while all the workers made $45,000 to $50,000, even with over 600 hours of overtime. He was buried alive in a landscaping accident. When I heard about it, I was not surprised. People eventually face consequences. Is it a coincidence that a man who took people away from their families and felt no remorse was taken from his own family? Story 21. I am still waiting for my sister's downfall, but alas, I do not think it is going to happen. I still have burn marks from when she used to put hot metal on my skin. Story 22. The guy who was with my girlfriend in high school got drunk, fell down, broke his ribs, and went to the hospital. He left against the doctor's orders, went home, got drunk again, fell once more, and died. He was honestly the worst person. He would have been the villain in an 80s movie. I still smile when I think about it. Story 23. He died alone in a trap house. His body was not discovered until it was badly decomposed and dragged out onto the sidewalk. He was an abuser, a misogynist, and a genuinely horrible person without empathy or remorse. I had the satisfaction of writing his eulogy and posting it to Facebook. He is not the first predator my family has covered for, and I dare say he will not be the last. However, unlike the previous ones, no one could stop me from exposing this one. I realized that their protection had less to do with genuine belief in his human decency and more to do with the fact that he made them look bad. The other predator covered for in my family had a nasty death from cancer. I had never known cancer to eat someone from the inside out with that kind of speed. 10 out of 10. Story 24. My dad killed himself, and I was not even sad. He was a terrible person. He blamed all his problems on everything and everyone but himself. All the while, he smoked a pack of cigarettes a day and misused prescription drugs. It was not surprising that he developed lung cancer. It was a consequence of his actions. He suffered from lung cancer and ultimately died. Story 25. Max Landis was the epitome of a nepotism baby, given endless opportunities because of his famous father despite being a mediocre artist. Ideally, his fall from grace should have been due to his lack of talent rather than his victimization of many young women. However, it is satisfying to see him removed from the spotlight. Story 26. See you next Tuesday, boss. Inept, abusive, cheated on her husband. Without any reason, she came in and fired me one day. I looked her up years later and found her mugshot for driving under the influence. She was a drunk too. Yuck. Story 27. Oh, this is a juicy one. Watching someone who thrived on manipulation finally get exposed by their own lies and lose all the fake respect they built was chef's kiss satisfying. Karma does not miss. It just takes its time. Story 28. There was a girl in my cosmetology class who was constantly rude and somewhat mean to me, which was funny because she was much smaller and a few years younger. She had just graduated from high school. She was 18. I never bothered to fight back because her bullying was petty and not extreme, and I was in my 20s while she was just out of high school. My little sister was even older than her, so the girl seemed like a baby to me. In my early 20s, I didn't give it much thought, but these days it's less satisfying to remember. While going through school, she got a job at a local salon as an apprentice doing pedicures and manicures. However, someone wasn't supervising her properly because she ended up using a strong chemical meant for feet incorrectly. Instead of using the proper wrap, which she apparently couldn't find, she used tin foil. This produces more heat and is a big mistake. Here is the part that is not satisfying. An elderly woman had her foot literally smoking. I don't know how she didn't feel it immediately, but she didn't. She suffered severe chemical burns on her foot. The woman sued, the girl left cosmetology after that, and a few years later, she is still working at the same gas station. Story 29. I had a group of guys I went to high school with who were always the bully, tough guy types. Two main guys would always start problems with whoever they saw as lesser that day, and two more athletic guys in the group would step in and beat up anyone who stood up to them. A few other guys would cycle in and out, playing into everything. Every single guy in that group, except for one, developed a serious heroin addiction, ended up dead or in jail, or lost everything and became one of those recovery is my identity, God is good type of people. The one who didn't ended up having a falling out with all of them and went on to live a pretty normal life. I know it's dark, and I don't wish the horrors of addiction on anyone, having seen it firsthand. But it always seemed darkly karmic to me that this entire group would become so self-destructive so quickly. Story 30. A man who stalked, kidnapped, and beat his girlfriend almost to death. She was in critical condition, and dumped her out of the car. He broke every bone in her face. He was afraid of jail and took his own life. Story 31. My biggest bully, who made my life a living hell for 8 years, died later in a car crash. Rest in peace. Story 32. They died alone without anyone. No obituary, no visitation, no service. He was found in his apartment, but I don't know how. His ex-wife was contacted by law enforcement, and she bailed out, saying something like, "I don't care and don't want anything to do with him." His ex-wife's friends said that at one time he asked her why no one wanted to spend time with him. I guess he died not understanding why. Part 1. Because my typing skills are not what they used to be. Long story. I'll call him T. I worked for the same company, in the same department as T. We had people working under our supervision, as did two others, but we didn't work for each other. Right off the bat, I knew I wouldn't associate with him because he was the kind of guy who was a stereotypical man who thought the women were at his beck and call. Picture a boss on a TV show who patted women on the backside, took credit for their work, and treated them as substandard employees while he strutted around the office. Once he was talking to me while I was seated and started scratching himself. I freaked and yelled, "T, go scratch somewhere else. I don't want to be looking at that." I was a woman who said what I thought before my brain knew what I was doing. Weirdly, there were a lot of women in the company who liked him. I didn't get it, but who cares? I had a full load on my desk and was working hard to make my numbers. But it was strange with him. Have you ever seen someone who, the more you ignore them, the more they want to be in your circle? That's how it was. And it was driving me crazy because I had never seen that before. One night, I was out partying with some girlfriends and we ran into him. He started buying us drinks and introduced his friend Joe. Joe and I had some chemistry, but we were already in relationships. A few years later, it became what we've heard so many times. The time was right, and Joe and I got together. Of course, the elephant in the room was T, who it turned out was not only Joe's best friend, but they had known each other since Little League. I was upfront and explained that I didn't mix with T because I didn't like him professionally, and what little I knew about him personally, I didn't like that either. He was cheating on his girlfriend with anything that wasn't nailed down, and I didn't want to be around her knowing that. Since we were on the subject, I asked Joe how he felt about it since he was T's best friend. We talked it out and squared away. Joe was going to visit and go on their fishing trips, and I could pick and choose when I would go. I absolutely did not want to ruin their friendship because I didn't want to be in close quarters with T. I've been in that position and didn't like it, and I wouldn't do that to him either. You know what? T thought since Joe and I were seriously dating, we would start hanging out with him and his girlfriend, like the four of us sitting at the same table over dinner or breakfast, going to the fair, and visiting each other's houses. It was so weird. Then, much later, it turned into resentment, and Joe and T ended up having a shouting match during one of the happy hours their friends went to. Of course, I wasn't there and only know what Joe told me. Some backstory. Our company was bought by another company, so there were going to be changes in structure. The employees in our department were not touched because we were purchased for our department skills, and we would be training our counterparts within the new company. Some of those people would be working under our supervision, and people were shuffled around. At the bar that evening, it seems T said that when the changes were made, I would have to learn to report to him and do things his way, as if he was campaigning to be my boss. Joe knew my office day to day because, By that time, we were living together for a few years. Joe responded that I would never work for T because I had professional working relationships with upper management all the way to Mahogany Row. It turned out that Joe was right, and management's plans had nothing to do with me working for T. I didn't hear about this argument for months until I noticed he hadn't been to any happy hours with the group. They handled these get-togethers by word of mouth. Someone would say, "I need a drink. Want to go have a drink?" Then phone calls would take place, and normally it was T who set it up every 1 or 2 weeks. When I asked him why he hadn't been lately, he told me about the argument. Of course, I told him that was no reason to stop going to see his other friends who would go to the happy hours. You know how men start making noises without answering your questions. Something else must have happened that he didn't tell me because no one but Two ever contacted him to get together. And one of them only called because he wanted Joe to go in with him to buy some hunting and fishing property. In other words, they needed his money and credit rating. I remember him on the phone that day ending the conversation with, "Give me a call when everyone gets together." It was silence, and it was hard for me to see it happen because I believed it was centered around me and T. Joe and I were together for over 6 years, and right after Thanksgiving, everything was moving along like life does. We were getting ready for Christmas and already buying and wrapping gifts. He was leaving the house to go to work. He kissed me. I told him I loved him and to drive carefully. He drove all the time, going to one customer after another, and I worried about it. Joe died after a massive heart attack and was found in his truck in a customer's parking lot. He was 39 years old, not overweight and physically active. Back in 1998, a 39-year-old man was not scrutinized for heart problems by doctors. His blood work the previous year showed elevated cholesterol that he managed by eating better lunches, and the cholesterol got back in line 3 months later. The reason doesn't matter now. What mattered was his mother and father were destroyed. I was a mess, and in hindsight, I don't think I really believed it until I saw him in his casket that I picked out. I went through the motions that I had seen with family members who passed away. Making arrangements with his family, choosing flowers, writing the obituary, getting copies of pictures for visitation, arranging the service, choosing music, requesting death certificates, paying the funeral home. I did it with the help of very precious friends and family who made phone calls, fed me, and protected me. Story 33. My older brother, who bullied me as a child, is now not employed in his 40s. While I graduated and secured a well-paying job in my field, my uncle, who constantly relied on our struggling family, has been desperately trying to contact me because of his financial problems, and I have largely cut him out. My brother no longer talks to me, and I believe it is out of shame. I find it ironic that my uncle keeps asking my father about me and when I will talk to him. It likely frustrates him to know that I am not like my father and will not give him any money. Story 34. An ex-friend from high school was actually my biggest hater. When we were in college, she and another girl got really drunk and thought it would be wise to try to convince me to kill myself. They texted me all day, sending hurtful messages. The next day, she had the audacity to ask if I was okay. Years later, she has a felony for assaulting a police officer and lost full custody of her daughter. She deleted all her social media because I believe she is severely addicted to drugs. And it shows. She lost nearly all her friends. Maybe I should have more mercy, but I do not. Story 35. Harassed me and several others for having depression and poor mental health. Always talked behind people's backs and stirred up drama. Never had the courage to confront people in person. Checked their Twitter profile a couple of years ago and saw, "It has been 1 year since my suicide attempt." I couldn't help but crack a smile. Story 36. In real life, I hardly know any terrible people. It pays to be terrible. People love that. The same applies to famous people, from Donald Trump to Harvey Weinstein to Bill Cosby. I would have to name Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini as examples. They are extreme outliers. Most brutal dictators lived lavishly in either their own or another country. People I know in real life, the terrible people won in every instance by a large margin. Story 37. 2 biggest bullies in my high school. One took his own life, and one was killed in a driving under the influence accident. A former colleague who once told me I was borderline autistic and brought nothing to the table developed cancer of the larynx and had to undergo a laryngectomy. Story 38. Maury Travis was a serial killer in St. Louis, Missouri, active in the early 2000s. After a newspaper ran a story about one of his victims, Travis sent a letter with a computer-generated map showing the location of another victim's body. The map was downloaded from Expedia, and the police easily traced it back to Travis, leading to his arrest. When the police searched Travis's house, they found a videotape of him torturing and killing women. The videotape was labeled "Your Wedding Day." Story 39. My ex who abused me in high school now has a news article and a felony charge because he killed his now ex's cats. He had friends who did not believe me and chose his friendship over mine. Now they are overweight, working at the same gas station and the same bar in the same town, using the same drugs, while I am living my dreams sober in another state with amazing food, culture, and weather. Story 40. Cursed with compassion always, with a sliver of hope for positive change in any person. May all beings heal and grow for the betterment of this world. Story 41. Nixon was quite admirable. What a contemptible person. How painful it must have been to resign and be publicly disgraced. Was it enough? No. Story 42. My former best friend stole my writing. She has now been unemployed for 2 years and is still living with her father at the age of 27. Story 43. My abusive ex who loved playing mind games and always had to look like the perfect person on social media. They used to post sugary sweet relationship updates while gaslighting me behind closed doors. When we broke up, they painted themselves as the victim to all our mutual friends. Their perfect facade cracked when they tried the same manipulation tactics on someone who saw right through it. Their new partner started comparing notes with their exes, including me, and suddenly all those crazy ex stories my ex told had a different context. Last I heard before heading to Australia, their reputation imploded when people realized how many of us had nearly identical stories of emotional abuse and manipulation. Their carefully curated social media presence could not save them from their own pattern of toxic behavior finally catching up. Story 44. Pac God had been staging his roasts from the very beginning. I know people went crazy and started liking him at first, but now, seeing his career slowly deteriorate, I quietly feel happy and think he deserved it. Story 45. Evil parents took children, and grown children found a journal outlining all the terrible things their parents did to them. Karma can be harsh. Story 46. There was a difficult person at my high school who always did weird, annoying things. His downfall was that he lost his place with the popular students and gradually faded away. Story 47. One of my classmates annoyed me while I was enjoying myself in the downstairs unit, talking with my friends. Apparently, something I did upset him, and he decided it would be a perfect idea to throw a can of Red Bull at me, causing me to have a black eye for 3 weeks. He was immediately excluded following the incident, and I still feel bad about it. I set him off and cost him his future. I didn't mean any harm, but I made a mistake and have to face that. Story 48. My grandmother was very cruel to her children from the first marriage, as was her daughter to her sisters. They may have had the farmer family fortune in the bank, but ill health made them unenviable. I felt very wealthy beside them both. It was cruel to feel that sick, smug satisfaction, but it was certainly felt. She had been cruel to me in turn. However, it was bad-natured of me to revel in anyone's downfall in such a way. Story 49. Vitali, Johnny Somali, Wes Watson, Chris Chon, Maurice Falling to catch a predator. Look him up. Too many in my circle of people that I follow. Story 50. Jared Leto. I know people in real life who have been victims of his. It's insane how long he has operated openly as a predator. He is slowly starting to see some consequences for his actions, and I cannot wait until the whole house of cards comes down. It's unfortunate because he can act very well. His band is not enjoyable, though. Story 51. I came to say Kenneth McElroy, but I see he has already been mentioned. I will say that it made me smile when Deshaun Watson snapped his Achilles both times. May he never play again. Story 52. We are all watching it in real time right before our eyes. We see him failing daily. It is almost Shakespearean. The bigger you are, the harder you fall. Story 53. My former boss bullied me and tried to make me quit, but was then fired for lying and not respecting company policy. Story 54. Hassan Nasrallah witnessed his entire organization collapse. Many of his friends died horrible deaths, either blown up or suffocated by gases. Story 55. Where I used to work in an emergency room, the manager and educator were truly awful people. After I left, they were both fired. The educator is now working at a smaller hospital an hour away and has lost her cushy managerial role. She now works as a regular staff nurse. The manager was removed from the premises by security, but I am not sure where she went. Story 56. A former friend of mine was a terrible bully and allowed her brother to sexually assault me. She tricked me into being somewhere and then turned a blind eye, denying that it happened. She ended up dropping out of high school due to an unplanned pregnancy and now lives in a trailer, constantly fighting with the baby's father. Story 57. My brother spent years insisting that the home my parents bought and paid for was actually his. He lived with them, but the home was never in his name, nor did he contribute much financially. He was so insistent that he threatened to kill me at one point. As my parents aged, he orchestrated getting my father into a long-term care home and neglected my mother to the point that she fell, broke her hip, and died. My parents' will was explicit. Everything was split 50-50 between my brother and me. Guess who is getting kicked out of his house? Karma is a bitch. Story 58. Back in college, I had a classmate I used to be close with. Things changed when I landed a high-paying online job while still studying. I tried to help others by recruiting and training them, but most did not succeed. Somehow, that is when many of my classmates suddenly turned on me. They started acting cold and talking behind my back. One girl in particular seemed to lead the group. She gatekept class information, excluded me from group chats, and even tried to sabotage our research projects. It was awful. Fast forward to graduation. I walked the stage as magna cum laude. She did not receive any honors. I did not say a word, just smiled and kept walking. Story 59. My brother distanced himself from the family. Only a few of them knew where on the Cape he lived. After back surgery, he gained a lot of weight. I guess he was embarrassed. He got addicted to pain pills. One day, around 21 years later, with no communication from me, I had my own private reasons and did not want him in my life. I got a call that he was found dead in his apartment on the couch in his bathrobe. He had just been paid. His check was cashed, and $2,000 sat on the table next to the couch along with drug paraphernalia and more drugs. It was said that he overdosed on fentanyl. That's not all. When he was taken to the morgue, they released his apartment to be cleaned. My brother and sister went there, and the only person who had a key was the maid. She apparently went in after they took him away, took what she wanted, the cash, the drugs, and left the paraphernalia and other things around the apartment before the family came. That's sad. I guess she will reap what she sows because Jesus was watching her and he wasn't happy. Such a life of miscommunication with 13 siblings and only contact with the extra toxic, nosy, troublemaker sister who never tried to talk him into reconciliation. The rest of my siblings would have loved to see him, but the wrong sister was the one who never wanted reconciliation. She had him. She loved it when anyone asked her about him. She made things up to hurt us or amuse herself. Then when she was to pick up his things, they were stolen. Good job, Kathy. Sad life. Story 60. Joe Bastianich, MasterChef judge. I strongly dislike him. He is disrespectful, entitled, racist, and outright unpleasant. The way he belittles the contestants and discards their dishes on MasterChef is completely unacceptable. He is also unkind to the children on MasterChef Jr. Story 61. Elon Musk. His downfall was so great I could no longer tolerate this nonsense. He realized Donald Trump was no good and he left. I hope he sides with the Democratic Party. Story 62. Hillary Clinton and her associates have a special place in hell. While I would never cheer or hope for anyone's demise, I will not be sad when they are gone. Story 63. I am cooking some spaghetti and have some housework. I should probably get on the keyboard too. Give me a few. Okay? Story 64. Some white people placed Planned Parenthood clinics in black neighborhoods and urban communities, thinking it would deter black people from having children. Then they got upset when we used the services. It turns out they have trouble having children themselves. The world is becoming more black and brown. Story 65. All you tend to suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. Reddit users must secretly love President Trump. Almost every post on Reddit manipulates the answer to be Donald Trump. You hate him so much, but he lives rent-free in your individual heads. No matter the question, the answer is Donald Trump. What was the worst day in your entire life and why? Answer: the day Donald Trump and Melania Trump came down the golden escalator, because that is when the media told me to start hating him. Who is your greatest inspiration? Answer: my greatest inspiration is not Donald Trump. It is kind of hilarious how much many of you think about our president. I feel sorry for you, and I know you will all come at me, but I do not give a fuck. I just do not see how you all do not see this. It is like a big Reddit blind spot. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.